Hi, I'm Carrie Lee Merritt, and welcome back to Meritocracy. I'm here for part 2 of my talk with King Williams, the writer and filmmaker from Atlanta, Georgia, with his new documentary, The Atlanta Way. We're in our last few stages of fundraising, so please, we'll repost that link down at the bottom here. If you can help him get that out and get this film to the people, we desperately need it. So you talked a little bit about how you loved film from your earliest memory as a child. What are some of your favorite films?
My favorite film actually, like a lot of them are old. So one of my favorites to watch is this movie. It's really, really old actually, like called Metropolis from like 1927.
Oh, I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just really cool from Fritz Lang. I really enjoy that one. I really enjoyed Godfather movies, like part 1 and 2. I act like 3 didn't exist. Coming to America is another one. I just like movies that are very much have like they build into a story. So like a lot of movies now, and I'm not against them, like you don't feel like there's a sense of place in it and a certain real world weight to it. And I always like that with older movies. And
So narrative driven.
yeah, just like you feel like you're in the world of something, like you're fully into it and like you don't never kind of tune out. And so I don't really get that from a lot of newer movies. So I'm just like an old person at heart, I guess.
And so you had said you loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a kid.
Yes.
And then you ended up working on the remake.
That was such a weird thing. I told everybody in my family, like, oh my God, this is like life coming full circle, because my very first image was watching Ninja Turtles with my dad and like looking over to my dad, like grabbing his hand and being like, Dad, Dad. Like that was the very first image I have. And so to come back, like, I don't know how many years later that movie was from that, and to work on the Ninja Turtles remake meant something to me that I had completed like a full loop in my life and it was time to start another phase of life. And I was just really excited for that. And so just being on professional film sets, it was all the things I wanted and I didn't know I needed. So I really enjoyed that.
And so when you were working in New York, you were kind of a jack of all trades on these sets? You were doing a little bit of everything?
Yeah, so very clear. I started out as an intern through Spike Lee, and I got that through Twitter. And then the only reason I kept staying with Spike Lee is because there was literally nothing I wouldn't do. I mean, with exception, there was one point where there was on the set of one of his movies called Red Hook Summer. Anybody who knows work with me, I did whatever they needed to do. If they needed somebody to like stop people from walking through the set, or people to run up and talk to Spike while he's filming, or to get lunch, or to like walk to different parts of Brooklyn to get things, I would do whatever it was to get it done. And so that attitude and that hustle kind of kept me going. And so it just gave me a little rep. And so Spike, his assistant was like, hey, you gonna come back and work for us for a while and just come in the office? And so I did that for a few months and then went to Sundance with them, did the same thing.
Wow.
And then right at the moment of Sundance, there was an opportunity that came up where I didn't know that, again, there was just me hustling around. There was a woman there named Monica Barraza. She works on a lot of other movies up in New York. And she was like, hey, there's this thing, this Ben Stiller movie coming. Do you want to come and work as a production assistant? I was like, yeah. And I just told Spike, like, hey, I know I'm like, with assistants, is it okay if I do this? And they're like, yeah, just. And so from then on, they always kept me in like work with different movies and things like that.
Oh,
so,
wow. And so you've worked on some big name movies that all of our audience would have heard of.
So I worked on The Wolf of Wall Street. I worked on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle remake. I worked on season 1 of The Leftovers. It's actually a lot now. I worked on the Carrie Diaries. I worked on this Broadway thing that never got off the ground, but that was actually really a good experience. I worked on the Jack Ryan remake that before the TV show on Amazon. And it was so many different movies and TV shows. I think for about 4.5 years, I worked every single day, almost 7 days a week for like 4.5, 5 years. And so before I moved back to Atlanta. And so it was just like so many different things. That experience is something I will never like take. I will never like take that for anything else. You can never pay me any money to kind of take that experience away.
And you even learned from this experience how the financial end of movies works, and even documentaries, and how to fundraise, right?
So one of the things I did that kind of positioned me different. Most people, when they get in that position, when you work on set, period, you have to become a PA. The PA is essentially like the fry cook at McDonald's. The thing is, every department has their own production assistant, but every production assistant, for the most part, starts on set. Is like, just to kind of understand what's going on. Like, it's a safety reason too. You just don't want people who don't know what they're doing to walk into something or like get hurt. And so once you do that, most people, they kind of go into their departments and they work their way around. For me, I wanted to work in the office. So I want to work either directly in accounting or payroll or the production office. I wanted to see how the papers work, how the money moves. And so I spent most of my time there, and most people were kind of surprised, and they were saying, well, why don't you go on set, or why don't you work with the camera department? Like, no, because while that skill is valuable, I want to learn like the real skill on how to actually build a business out of it, how to actually sign my own deals, see what it checks, how much it costs for actors, how to move people around. And you can't get that
Brilliant.
unless you're in the office. And so
That's brilliant.
I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the side I think so many people who fail don't
Yeah.
master, right?
Right.
Your film with Sarah Burns is on Eastlake. That's something that's near and dear to your heart. You grew up not far from there. You've written a great essay about it for the supporter report, and I know people always try to come back at you for this essay, but it's a very convincing essay. If you can,
I was gonna say which one. Yeah, so I wrote a essay, and I think it was my first or second one with the supporter report.
yes, it was I think the first one on Eastlake.
Yeah, and the very first one was Eastlake, which was that I just wanted to know what happened, where the people went. And so I've always said this before, which is, as a child growing up on like that side in Decatur in particular, Eastlake Meadows was a big thing. It was like a physical place. It was a real place. It had buildings. Like I could see it. I could touch it. My dad, one of his best friends lived on Alston Drive, which is about 500 feet away from, like maybe 1,500 feet away from Eastlake Project. So I went there a lot as a kid. I went by there a lot. And so as we moved to different parts of Decatur, we moved to a different part. As I got older, I wasn't putting two and two together on what happened to the people at Eastlake. It just felt as if one day, one summer I came back and the whole project was gone. And nobody could ever give me concrete answers. And so that was like the fuel and impetus for me to kind of even get into documentary films and even pursue it at Georgia State University.
And now, of course, Eastlake is really associated with the golf tournament, right?
Right.
The one time a year where the richest Americans and pretty much all white Americans flock in to Eastlake for this golf tournament that I think Tiger Woods was at this year, right?
Tiger was he's
big golf tournament. So, I mean, the whole area, the whole corridor around Memorial Drive has just completely changed and is completely changing within the next few years. What do you see as the biggest challenges as the city's moving forward in a way that seems kind of, again, haphazard and that there's no kind of central planning going on here?
The biggest thing, like you said before, it's not even just having a central planning body that actually has like the real teeth to either regulate things or to like correct things, because City of Decatur has their own plans, which is different from like the rest of DeKalb County, and Decatur sits right next to Eastlake, and Eastlake has their own plans. And so because it's Georgia, like everyone likes to kind of control their own thing without like a real regulatory body to kind of dictate things. And so that's why we have, particularly in this corridor right here, you have so many different places that don't geographically make sense. Like we have sidewalks that completely drop off on one side of the street. Like even getting here, like I saw like there's a sidewalk on one side of the street and then drops off on the other side. Like that level of planning is just basic level of infrastructure. Or how you have some places that have paved roads or some places that have the metal plate on top. Nobody's communicating together. And so that's become so much more of a problem going forward. And I'm just like, we could do this if we just kind of, everybody takes a little bit less and just kind of works together to do something.
Do you think that Atlanta's different than a lot of other cities because of these kind of little localized enclaves and it seems like in the last few years, there's so many more, right? Brookhaven and all that, everybody's basically making their own little city within the city of Atlanta.
Right. Atlanta is special because no other place in America is a series of neighborhoods like Atlanta is, and those neighborhoods and sometimes have just as much power as like the mayor or the governor, because they can reject things, block things, and they make it really difficult to really do anything unless they want to.
Right.
Like you mentioned, Brookhaven, DeKalb County it's the densest county in Georgia and one of the densest counties in the entire Southeast United States. It has a population bigger than Washington, D.C., but you have probably 400 different neighborhoods, and you have, of those 400, maybe 100 of them actually have real regulating bodies where they're doing 100 different ideas and they do not work together. This is considered, we have a county level government, and they do a lot of county level things, but the local level can really just stifle any type of movement, any one way or another. It's almost too much government, but it's too much smaller pieces of government, and that's really been just causing real like dumb kind of things to happen. Like I mentioned, like the plates on the street, the sidewalks. But one of the things we talk about too in DeKalb County, which is that like 911 and dispatch services. So where we are in Decatur, like, let's say we go walk over 10 feet, we fall in East Atlanta, if I fall and break my leg. Because of like the lack of coordination with all these little enclaves, if I fall and break my leg, I call 911 dispatch. they're going to call either the city of Decatur, DeKalb County, or city of Atlanta, and then they're going to bounce it with internally as to who's going to pick me up because I broke my leg,
Right.
because we have so many little fragmented pieces of government.
It's untenable, and
Yeah.
it seems like we've gone the opposite way that technology would have allowed us.
Right.
Right.
You would think technology would make it a lot easier, but we're kind of impeding our own progress by making it more restrictive and more hard to just do anything.
So do you think we need to eventually abolish all of these little bodies, or is it just a system of federalism when you have that the city of Atlanta has some sort of authority over certain aspects of governing?
I think that will probably actually happen in some form where like either the city or the county just starts reining in services and just kind of regulates them, because at that point, especially when it comes to infrastructure, you don't want a lot of people doing a lot of different things.
Right.
It's just not a good thing. But I think that my hot take is that I think the 5 main counties should just merge into one city, like one municipality with like several different local governments, because to look at the money we're spending just on basic infrastructure, public services, and either what we're not doing or doing, it would probably be much more efficient, much more cheaper if you had just one regulatory. New York has shown us that this can work before, and we have even places like Jacksonville, Florida, where if certain things merge together, you will probably have a better level of just life and services because it works together.
That's
So.
brilliant. It's a really smart plan that I hadn't really thought about before, and actually that I don't think I've seen written about in local papers in any kind of real way. Do you ever think about going into politics yourself?
Not really, actually. I mean, if it came up, I would. As somebody who meets a lot of politicians, it's just like, what are you doing? Like the people who end up running a lot of times are just like, it's just some of the most mind-boggling things. And the thing I would have to work with people like that, like single-minded about certain things, it's perplexing. But if it ever arose, I would take it up. So.
But you'll be there to advise people at least.
I would advise people for sure.
Yes.
I would do that. Yeah.
Maybe even do some campaign videos at some point.
I would, if it was like, if it's the right person or
Yeah.
something like that, I wouldn't be against it.
Yeah, well, you heard it here. You might see Senator King Williams at some point soon. I think you've got a great future in politics, because the ideas that you have of how to actually fix things, I mean, they're really innovative, and you don't hear people talking about it.
Well, I take that as a compliment, but thank you. Thank you for that.
It absolutely is. I want more people like you in government. That's the problems we have right now, is that you've got people, I think, that are almost fundamentally unable to deal with things at a macro level, that you can't see the forest for the trees. You've got to actually, you've got to pull back and figure out, what do we need to do to fix this system? Because, I mean, we're fundamentally broken if we don't do something, right?
I agree with you on that one. I agree with you. So.
Especially in the South. I know you know it as a Southerner who's lived in New York and experienced that kind of life. When you tell people who haven't lived in the South, who haven't really driven through the rural South, what life is like for a majority of Southerners, they kind of can't believe it.
As somebody who's grown up in the South and then like lived my adult life in New York, it is, when I came back, it was mind-boggling, because just the way in which we've kind of like allowed the South to kind of deteriorate is actually, it's sad, because there's so much great beauty, there's so much great people and great stories and history in the South. But just so you look at how we planned it and how we go about our cities and towns on the rural level, they're not built for sustainability. And that would be something like, if I was to run, I was the governor, it would be, one, how do we kind of maximize the efficiency and growth economic for Metro Atlanta? But then for the rural side, how do we actually revitalize our rural Georgia parts? Because the way we're kind of doing it right now is like we're incentivizing people to say, Amazon, build a distribution plant, and that will bring, for 20 years with no taxes, and you'll bring 1,500 jobs, that'll revitalize the area. And that's not really what you want to do. And so I think that would be like, if I was the governor, I would just be looking, all right, how do we revitalize these rural cores? We first start out, what's the anchoring small town? And then from that point into how far, like geographically, does this town work? What is the actual footprint of this? How many people?
Right.
And so building out that kind of like new infrastructure, and that's going to be more car-based. So how do we get more efficient vehicles? How do we build things like electric plants, testing facilities, things that all rural places throughout the South could use, and we could be doing that as like here as a laboratory test in the state of Georgia.
Because we don't need the one employer moving into these areas where it's a complete monopsony, which means that workers don't have a way to fight against the abuses of an employer. They don't have a way to try to be paid more at any job. It's just literally you have one employer to work for. You can either work or not work, and suffer those consequences. So yeah, you're right. We've got to figure out another way. One of the ways that I've thought about is to pair not only a universal basic income at a state level, but pair that with a state level jobs guarantee. You know, we need the infrastructure, we need things done in our state. Our roads are crumbling, our bridges, et cetera. Just basic things that we could have some sort of system of jobs available to people that pay a decent living wage, that come with benefits, you know, that come with health care. And if you had that, not only I think would it give people a way to make decent money, it then incentivizes every other employer, to pay and treat their workers well, because otherwise then workers can just jump ship and go work for the state, essentially.
Right. I think that idea of like a public option is a good one, particularly if we can do that well. I think about this in particular on the rural side, which is, okay, so we'll go like right outside of Macon. Macon, Georgia is like right in the center of our state, but all those communities that kind of build around Macon for the most part are kind of like just either a ghost town or they're going to be a ghost town very soon. And so my thing is like, how do we incentivize economic development on that end by saying, all right, if you're going to bring in local employment, I would say the easiest thing to do is one, how do we revitalize those neighborhoods? We rebuild them. So allowing for, if you're going to be a local person, you don't pay taxes up to a certain dollar amount if you're going to build X number of new homes, affordable homes, rehab homes, elderly homes on that end. The other one is that if you're a large employer and you're coming in as well, you might receive a tax break because Georgia loves tax breaks. I'm saying this for that. In order to direct seed funding for these particular local businesses, local like entrepreneurs, local contractors, and you make whatever the difference is you did in a donation to kind of get that facilitation going, to get the certain level going in terms of like just the everyday financial transfers, like particularly on the retail level.
Right.
And so I think about stuff like that all the time. Like how do we kind of like use different strategies? Because I think for rural Georgia and the rural South, it's going to take a combination of strategies and not one or the other. I think UBI, like what you're talking about, could be something very interesting. I would like to see how that kind of works in the rural context, so I'm not against it.
Thinking about with what is going to happen in rural areas in the state who have lost hospitals, who have lost elderly care facilities, we're going to need service professionals. I think the rural areas in large part are going to have to turn to a service-based economy, right? Especially as baby boomers age and get sick and are dying. We need people who are going to be, home care nurses, hospice nurses, healthcare workers that come to your home. That's the kind of a service sector we're going to really need, right?
Right. I do think that is a great way to kind of look at that. Like, how can we make rural Georgia like the hub for those type of people and those type of innovators who come out of that section? The other one I was thinking is too, like for all those people who eventually will be priced out of Atlanta, how do we get people who are on the borderline to kind of, who still working to either move to the rural or just right outside like the metro Atlanta area and really revitalize those areas as well?
Right.
So I think that we have a lot of things to think about, but I think that this is like a 30-year plan, and I would love to be on like the front lines of what that 30-year plan is to make Georgia very different.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm going to comprise a little brain trust, and we're all going to get together at Manuals or something and chart out a course for our state, because again, one of the things I love about Georgia is that as progressive as the city of Atlanta has ever been, it has kind of been a blueprint for other states and other cities in the South.
Yeah, if you can influence Atlanta, you can influence the rest of the South, like without a doubt.
Yeah.
So,
well, again, here with King Williams, the writer and filmmaker, and hopefully someday politician. If not politician, then he'll tell them what to do, because he's absolutely brilliant. We still need a last little bit of funding to get his documentary, The Atlanta Way, a documentary film on gentrification, to get that out. So please go ahead, hit subscribe to my YouTube channel, Meritocracy, and then hit on his link and donate. Thank you.